In this video, I want to share a story with you which illustrates why I think regrets help to make you a better person. On Sunday, it will be the 30th anniversary of my father passing away. I woke up early on that morning, the 12th of May 1994, and I didn't know why. I sat up and was just getting out of bed when the phone rang. When the phone rings at 5 in the morning, you just know it's not going to be good. It was my brother-in-law who told me that in the night my dad had had a massive heart attack and died. He'd only just come home from my brother-in-law's father's birthday party, where apparently he'd had a great time. Mum asked him if he wanted a cup of tea and he'd said yes. He went and sat in the living room while she made the tea. Moments later she turned around to ask him something and he was gone. It was all over just like that. No warning. Nothing. A few months before he died, I was on a visit to see them and I went into the bathroom to wash my hands and my mum followed me. She then proceeded to tell me that they'd had a conversation recently in which my dad told her that he didn't think I liked him. That shook me to the core. I told my mum he couldn't have been more wrong. But funny thing is, I couldn't tell him. You see, growing up, me and my dad had a good working relationship. I'd worked with him growing up and we'd always managed to talk about the business he had. But somehow we seemed unable to talk about personal stuff. When I got married, he'd come over to help me and do jobs for when I was getting my business ready for the summer. We could talk about that, but that was as far as it went. I felt that we'd never really built a close father and son relationship. We were more like a workmate relationship. And so as I drove the 100 miles to my mum and dad's that day, I was overwhelmed with sadness and regret. I felt regret about the relationship I had with my dad, the things I never did, and the things I'd never said that could have made our relationship closer. Above all, I regretted that my actions had made my dad feel as though I didn't like him. And as I walked into my mum's, all of that came back to me, and I regretted all the things I hadn't done. My elder sister, who lived 3 doors away from them, was at the hospital where they'd taken my dad. My elder brother was on his way, and my younger sister was on holiday abroad. But Mum wasn't on her own, as Dad's sisters and brother were there. I remember going to the hospital, and I can remember how helpless I felt as they ushered me into the room to see him. The next day, even though I wasn't the eldest of his children, I was the one nominated to go and arrange his funeral. Luckily, I wasn't on my own though, as my dad's brother Henry and my uncle Billy were on hand to come with me and guide me through the process. My mum had told me how much money they could afford to spend, and that was it. I had the task of sorting his funeral. The next day and a half were a blur as we went from funeral directors and venues to go and arrange his wake. I did all of this knowing that I didn't feel as though I should be the one to be sorting it out. In regards to my little sister, who was still abroad, I was nominated to phone her and tell her about it. But I refused and said I'm not going to do it and be the one that ruins her holiday, and that I'd tell her when she came home. And so here I was with the whole world crashing around my shoulders. All the tasks were being passed to me and feeling all this regret about not doing enough for my dad when he was alive. And yet I felt as though I was having to carry everyone else when all I wanted to do was sit in the corner and cry. I dreaded my sister coming home, and the day she did, we all sat waiting for her car to pull in the driveway. When her car appeared, everyone looked at me. I walked out to the car, opened her door and broke the news to her. I told her what had happened and why I hadn't phoned her. I think she was in shock because she seemed to take it in her stride. And she went in and saw my mum and proceeded in a really calm way. The next few weeks went by in a flash, and I don't really remember that much about them. But I remember on the day of the funeral, I felt like it was an out-of-body experience. I was there, but I felt as though I was looking in from the outside. And it took me until I was in my mid to late 50s to realise that I'd been carrying this regret around with me for all these years. It wore me down, it played on my mind, and it was like a weight on my shoulders. Every time I thought about my dad, I blamed myself for everything not being cosy between us, as though it was all my fault. Where my dad was concerned, I had so many regrets. I could remember once being a teenager and telling him that I'd never be so strict with my kids and that I'd be a better dad to them. And all of this was because I wanted to do something work-related my way, and he wouldn't let me. Once I'd had my boys, the things I thought he'd been wrong about when I was growing up were exactly right. I hear my dad when I talk with my boys. I say things he said to me. It's weird how that happens. As I've gotten older, I've become more like him. However, I've learned from my regrets in the relationship I had with him, and the one I have with my boys is closer. I learned the lessons from my relationship with my dad, and I've made sure that I'm more responsive to them, and I always tell them I love them whenever we speak. Your regrets will teach you about you. In my case, I regret I wasn't wiser and didn't know how to make our relationship closer. After all, it is a two-way street. It wasn't all down to my dad to do. Regret isn't something you need to get rid of. It's something you learn from and something to help make you a better person. The mistake I made was to let those regrets become the stick to beat me with. You don't have to let those regrets hold you back and make you feel bad. If you can sit down and make it a learning lesson and understand why you feel regret, you can take the lesson and walk into a better life. I regret that my dad thought I didn't like him. I regret that I didn't do something about it when I had the chance. I regret that at that age, I didn't know how to show my appreciation of him, that I wasn't worldly enough to know how to tell him how much I loved him. But what that lesson has taught me is to show people you care. It took me a long time to stop beating myself up about it. You have to forgive yourself and realise that sometimes you get things wrong. But I learned, and even though I'm still not good at telling people how I feel face to face, I can think of many times in the last 10 years when I've written a post on Facebook talking about a person and why I appreciate them and the kindness they've shown me in the past. I know this works because I've had replies, if not from the person themselves, but from those close family members who've told me how much what I'd written had meant so much to them, as they hadn't realised they'd done something special. And so, as this significant anniversary rolls around, I've realised that those regrets I had back then have made me a better person, a much more rounded one. It took me 20 odd years to realise that though. When my dad passed away, I really didn't feel worthy of being the one who had to do all the arranging of what needed to be done. Looking back, there was nothing I could do about the regrets I had, and those feelings of unworthiness were just guilt. And yet those feelings, uncomfortable as they are, have helped me to become a better man. Like all the failures in your life, it's about how you look at them. And if you look at them in the right way, your regrets will become your teachers and lead you into a better life. They'll make you stronger. Don't let them destroy you. Don't let them break you. Learn from them. We all have our own journeys, and your regrets may be different to mine. But the one thing we have in common is that if it's down to something we perceive we did or didn't do, remember, we did what we thought was best at the time. Wisdom comes from experience, and experience comes from mistakes we make and the regrets we learn from. If I've said anything that's made you feel differently about your regrets, let me know down below. Don't spend the rest of your life beating yourself up over them. Learn the lesson and become a better person for it. And if you click up there, I'll tell you what optimism can do for you.